So what we see as an analyst firm is that gap between the so-called haves and the have-nots, right? There's the companies that can release right away as many times as you basically like, and then there's the others who have a ton of manual steps in each phase of that release process, and that comes from compliance, from technology, from all kinds of areas, and it makes the releases more painful and more difficult. Adam, how do you see this when you look at your customers?
Hmm. Yeah, so that's a good question. So to be frank, when Morpheus comes into the release equation, release is the component of what we enable people to produce. Similar to what we talked about before, where a lot of times we're simply orchestrating the release mechanism. So if it's still manual, that can pose a problem. We do have a way for them to employ a release heuristic into, say, an environment provision. But one of the things I really like to think about Morpheus through the lens of as it pertains to that velocity of release is a little bit more upstream, even in the CI phase, right? How do I go from ideation of code to packaged product? How do I actually build that? How do I integrate that functionally? What Morpheus really focuses on is the ability to model an environment and consistently deliver it, essentially shifting a little bit of control over the infrastructure left to the development team for the life cycle of that.
And Brad, then you can pin down the compliance, right? You can basically make sure the developers do the build process, use the libraries that they should be using, do the performance test, and build all that into your workload and workflow. And that is really a very interesting thing to consider for a lot of enterprises that are much more manual than that.
One of the things I like to think about too is how do we follow a GitOps or promotion-based workflow just for the environment itself? How do we ensure configuration consistency as it goes through dev, test, and prod? Obviously, your code's going to be following that. That's been the de facto standard for some time. But I'm amazed at how many people still lack that ability to do it with what's going on in the environment. Docker, of course, gives us a lot of control over that. It's very attractive for that same proposition, shift the control left. Well, Morpheus allows you to do it consistently regardless of the technology.
And Pratt, from a market perspective, that ability to do this thing with Kubernetes, where you push out repeatable clusters and make that part of the CI/CD process, and I would imagine that it goes over pretty well with a lot of customers.
And if you're looking at kind of modernizing that aggregate application library, right, the ability to think about your processes in a consistent way, whether it's your bare metal environments, whether it's things you're moving off of VMware, whether it's Kubernetes and containers, even down to the underpinning cluster itself, that consistency is what we really wrap around it, which helps you get both kind of ops classically, what it needs to manage service levels, to manage costs, to manage the infra, as well as what developers need to get their feedback loops, to move things across their life cycle. So it's like delivering the best of both worlds is where we see ourselves fitting.
Yeah, and it still leaves developers with that freedom of keeping their tool chain and still using their beloved development and DevOps tools for that whole cycle. Thank you very much, Brad. Thank you, Adam.
Thanks.